Okay, welcome to Cliff Notes of Elevated Alignment. Hopefully, most people who are listening to this know what a Cliff Note is. Um, yeah, this is Michelle McInnis, and I'm excited to kind of put this together for people as we continue to grow this amazing community of conscious attractors and conscious beings in order for all of us to kind of continue to evolve and have a sacred space in which that can happen. So within the first class for elevated alignment, we spent the beginning of the classroom talking about what it is and what the vision is for this community. And this community is going to be the center point for others who are ready to grow and develop their own innate abilities, which means that you're going to become more focused on what it is that you're feeling and understanding that feelings are generated from within. Our feelings are not generated from what the outside circumstances are. That's what we've been conditioned to believe and think. And because there's so much going on in the planet, it's so easy for people to get triggered and then bounce their focus out into kind of the wild bliss of emotional crap that kind of happens in society. And what this group is learning to do and support one another in is learning that you can feel any way you want to feel no matter what's going on. It's kind of like in a lot of the great ancient texts, they talk about there's going to be a point in time where those that are light workers, those that understand who they are and the power that they have, will be the ones that can help the others who are kind of just walking around the world blindly. And that's one of the premises of all of us gathering together. It also gives us an opportunity to practice the different emotional states and understanding what each emotion actually does for us and not being afraid of any emotion that comes up. However, when we make decisions and we make choices in our lives from certain viewpoints or certain feelings or set points, it will make an impact on what comes to you in your life. So we spent a lot of time in the class kind of discussing and dissecting our emotional set points because in our current society, we spend a lot of time in a state of fear. It's kind of the way we've been conditioned now as humans is to be living in a more fearful centered society. And what that does is that gives people a really easy way in order to keep people contained, to living small, to not really experiencing the joy and the bliss and the ecstasy and the heaven on earth that we actually can live in. But because we're always either waiting, quote, I hear this a lot, for the other shoe to drop or for, you know, all the belief systems that everybody else around you is trying to impart upon you, it feels sometimes kind of stagnant when we've got some things that we're trying to create in our lives and we don't know how to get there because we're living in our story. We're living in the conditioning that was created for us. And we talked about in class this idea that, by the age of between 5 and 7, your belief systems are pretty much set for you. And again, let me state that they're set for you because when you're first born, you're born with still feeling connected to the divine, God, universe, whatever you may call it. And as we grow, we understand that we have to behave certain ways in order to be accepted into our groups. Whether it's our family group, whether it's our church, our school, our parents' affiliations, whether you're like in some type of clubs, whatever it is, you learn very quickly as a kid. In order to be accepted in these, you have to behave and believe within these rules and systems. And what's happening is as a collective, We are still trying to manage our world with a lot of the belief systems that were created for us between the ages of 5 and 7. And so it's so understandably acceptable for people in this society then to just kind of stay stagnant and not want to play with those good juicy feelings, because we were told as kids, the big one I was told is that, oh, Michelle, you've had too much fun already today. I remember thinking that, and I still can find myself playing in that a little bit. And and so it's time for us to wake up and take off the blinders that a lot of us are still living in certain areas. And for some people, they're living their whole life in those blinders. It's time to wake up. And this is the group that's going to do this, because we are going to hold the light for ourselves. We're going to learn how to live in the feeling states that just feel better, even when, quote, shit's hitting the fan. We're never going to poo-poo any emotion that comes up. That was another big part that we talked about. We talked a lot about this idea that the number one thing I want people to always understand when I'm talking is no emotion is bad. There's no emotion that you need to say is good or bad. It is a feeling state, and we are here in these human bodies to experience all emotions. That's why we came, is to have these different experiences in our lives, because they help us grow, they help us to expand. However, we can get stuck in the labels of these emotions, and that's what we're not going to do. We're not going to stay stagnant in anxiousness and call ourselves, well, I'm just an anxious person here. What we're doing is we're realizing that moment by moment, you get to experience many different emotions throughout the day. And how do we know that? Where's the evidence? The evidence is simple. Think about your day from morning until night, and you can tell me probably many different feelings that you experience throughout the day. I mean, think about getting up and just driving somewhere. The easiest one for me to say is when people cut people off. Such an easy place for people to jump into and get angry. And then they arrive at their destination and they're actually meeting somebody that they haven't seen in years. And they feel like this peace and this love come over them as they're hugging their person. And then you go throughout your entire day until you go to bed at night. And then when you're sleeping at night, you're still experiencing feelings. So feelings are moments. And feelings cannot have a life unless you are identifying with them in that moment. But it's just a moment. We have a choice every day if we're going to feel and experience something for a longer period of time. And again, that's okay. But when you're ready to leave a feeling place and move to something that feels a little bit better, this is the type of group we are formulating, because we know, if you understand the idea of how things are created in our lives, when we're feeling better and we're feeling lighter and brighter and happier, things that we've truly desired and want in our lives just simply appear without effort. And this happens all the time. You're constantly creating and manifesting. And then more exciting new things kind of pop into your world. And that's what we need to spend more time in. It's easy to go into the fear-based emotions because they're deep, they're dark, they're heavy, and a lot of people are playing in them. How often do you hear how often do you actually hear people talking about really blissful, joyful stories? It's happening more and more, which I'm very grateful for. But more than not, most conversations you have are either you're trying to solve a problem or you're reiterating a story. Usually when some good news happens, it's quick and we've moved on to the next thing. And what I'm asking for elevated alignment people, elevated aligners is what I'm calling us, is to spend more time in that space, that feeling space that just feels better, because that is where the magic lays, and that's where miracles happen, and that's where conscious awareness awakens within people. But we can't get there easily unless you understand that you don't need to fear any emotion that you have, and that it doesn't matter what's going on in the external world. You have a choice on what you're participating in your inner world. That's the part that takes the focus. And that's what we are working on within this beautiful conscious evolution and revolution that we're creating here. This is really for people who want to go to the next level, who want to elevate their life into a different space and to stay in that space. And we need to have other people in the community that are experiencing this themselves and can help support one another in it. One of the other topics we talked about was higher soul self and what the higher soul self actually is. So in essence, the higher soul self is that bigger component of who you really are. We have our human self. We have this physical body with the five, six senses. I mean, some people, I consider us to have six senses because the intuitive part, which is a sixth sense, really is one of the beautiful ways that that higher part of you, your soul self, which is much bigger than you, because your soul self is that invisible part of you that's connected to that of God and the divine source. And your higher soul self, or your inner self, some people call it, is the aspect of you that knows you and knows all of your past lives and knows exactly what it is you're here to do in this lifetime, or you what you want to be working on. And so it's going to constantly be pointing at you to go in one direction or another. It's constantly guiding you. The problem is we spend more time not listening to that and going with the herd of cattle in society that you've got to do things this way, where your higher soul self is just constantly trying to help you to evolve farther than that. So, understanding that your emotions are actually the way in which your higher soul self can tell you if what you're doing in the moment that causes a feeling is in your best interest or not. It's like this telephone wire, but it's attached to your emotions. So, anything that doesn't feel good, because there's a ton of different ways that we label emotions that don't feel well, you can tell yourself in that moment when you catch it, wait a minute, my higher soul self is obviously indicating that something that I'm thinking about right now or doing does not resonate with who I really am. And that'll be a really big focal point that we'll continue to come back to in many, many different ways with elevated alignment. But for this week, what we wanted to do and what we did as a group is we collaborated and came up with things that really do feel good, things that are always happening. Now, yes, this is a list of external things, but that's how we're going to start to prepare ourselves to start working on how we're feeling these things internally, which means we have to know how to get ourselves into a better state feeling when we're done feeling not so great. Again, those emotions aren't bad, but they do have that feeling of not feeling so great. A lot of them do. And in class, we have a wheel of emotions that will be put up every week so that you can kind of get a better idea about emotions and how they're gathered and grouped. But for this purpose of the Cliff Notes, we're really just understanding that the higher soul self is constantly sending you signals when you're thinking or feeling something that isn't in alignment with who you truly are. And a lot of those times that just means that there's a belief system attached to it. And that belief system needs to be taken a look at. And we will deal with that in weeks coming up. So we gathered together to really make a list of things that totally blissed us out. Things that just put a smile on your face when you think about. And as usual, when we're doing these type of things, this isn't a typical conversation you have with people. So it takes a few moments to kind of figure that out. People can always tell you what they don't like, but to flip them into conditioning of saying what you do like is it's just going to take practice. So we wrote down things like sunsets and the names of our animals and favorite music. We talked about colors or hobbies that we have, cooking, painting, creating. And then we talked about vacations, and vacations always seem to be the one that people can perk up with. And the idea that, oh, yeah, that was so great. And that's when I started to see smiles on people's faces, because we did a quick meditation. There's small meditations that will happen in each one of these classes because they are the thing that teaches us how to get back into alignment and then to elevate ourselves to something that feels better. So it was beautiful to watch all of that and for people to understand that the more we practice with each other, especially in this community, of spending time talking and feeling our way to things that just feel really good is where the magic lays. And it's where we can shift the world, and it's where we can begin to see the whole world begin to shift from war and from famine into there's enough for everyone, and everyone has a safe place and a loving place and are creative. Like the utopia that we actually can be living on earth, and I truly believe we can be living that. But until we change what's going on with ourselves internally, that can't happen. And that's why we keep repeating the human ways of living, because we don't take the time to go inward to figure out, wow, gosh, I have this really deep feeling about this and it doesn't feel good. And you can't then impart your wisdom on people unless you're working on those internal dialogues and those feelings that are happening for you. The politicians can't change things until we change ourselves. And that means we have to elevate what we expect out of ourselves and what we expect out of the world, but in coming from a very loving, high vibrational state. So this community is about that. It's about expressing and learning how to do that while living your daily life. Because you can go to retreats, which I love, and you can listen to all of this stuff online, but if you're not practicing this, it just is another thing that you can talk about rationally, but you don't experience because you're not putting it into practice. So people who are coming to this, that's what I'm asking. That's the expectation. Is are you practicing it? Because if you are, things are going to shift for you, and they're going to shift really quickly. In fact, every time we get together, there's going to be one or two processes that you can utilize. And I hope that you do utilize, because otherwise it's just, again, reading a book and then putting it down and forgetting about it every day. Like, this is the place that we're going to share our experiences with and what really works for people. And then for the things that aren't working, we're going to talk about those things. And we did in class. People had examples of, like, Thanksgiving coming up, and we've got a whole political stuff going on right now, and so you're going to have time to practice these processes. And as we begin to elevate ourselves with inward, everything outside of you begins to elevate. The people you live with, your community, the place that you work, things will begin to just shift in really incredible, easier ways. And then when something does happen that doesn't feel so good, you're going to have a place to come and be open and honest about it, but we're not going to let you sit in the story, because that doesn't work anymore. That's what we've been doing. But bring it so we can help you shift out of it, to remind you who you really are, which is you are God expressing through this human body. You are Source expressing through this human body. So it's amazing to spend time with people who are ready to make the shift for themselves. And although that may sound selfish, we all have to get selfish again, because we're all spending our time doing things that externally look great but are dying inside. That's a constant in my private practice. I talk to people all the time who are just so unhappy because they're not doing what they need to be doing for themselves. And that's a whole nother story. But elevated alignment is here for those who are ready to expand and to grow and to hold themselves to a new standard, which is, I always can feel better. And I have a choice in this moment. And again, if there's a feeling you want to play with for a while, that's okay too. We've got to stop fearing emotions because they're not good or bad. They are just a way for us to experience life. And that is an amazing way, and it's so freeing to think about life in that aspect. So that was our brief little summary of our first class, and I'm really excited to keep going and growing. So this week, everyone is going to be continuing to make their bliss list for themselves, and then they were given some homework, also some processes, which if you are able to come to a class at some point in time, let me know, and we can give you previous processes and the new one that we'll be working on. But find your bliss point. Find those things that just make you flip and smile. And practice your focus, because we really live in a society which focus is there's not a lot of focus out there anymore. And that's why I think meditation has become such a huge either just through meditation classes or through yoga or through Tai Chi. There are many, many ways that people in the Western society are starting to wake up, because those things help you to focus. And the more focus we have actually means the more control you actually can feel with your emotions. So, have fun blissing out, have fun making that list, have fun practicing and noticing what emotions you're feeling in this moment. And until next time, my beautiful elevated aligners, have a wonderful, wonderful day.